Yes, everyone, the likely thing happened. Ubisoft just delayed Assassin's Creed Shadows again. This time it's not by much, though. It's only till March 20th. But of course, they still do want some pre-orders, so while the whole season pass plan is dead, there is going to be the first expansion, obviously, and that is included with the pre-orders. It's called Claws of Awaji, and it is 10 hours long, in line with similar Assassin's Creed games. So in one way, that's the new news, but it's not really. It's not the complete story. Because, yeah, players are skeptical, but what's going to matter a hell of a lot more to Ubisoft is that their investors are not particularly happy. Not at all. You see, Ubisoft stock is down from its highs of €99 to just €12 today. And it would be super easy to just say, oh, that was the COVID bubble. All the stock numbers were stupidly up for games. But then you take a look at some of the competition, because that's actually false. Look at EA. They are right now near an all-time high. Similar story for Take-Two. So if you're an investor in the game sector, you're looking at Ubisoft and thinking, my god, what are you people doing? But here's what's actually wild about this story, where it goes so much deeper. You see, right now, there is a shareholder revolt going on, but there's also a pact between the ruling Guillemot family, who started the company, and Tencent. Tencent are probably looking at this and seeing a big tasty opportunity. So, this is one of those stories where nobody's really happy. Shareholders are not really a big fan of delays to their profits, and players don't like hearing about Ubisoft's plan for, and I quote, capitalistic options to extract the best value for stakeholders. The delay side of the story is actually quite simple. It's just another month to bug fix and polish the launch build of the game. And that's for fairly obvious reasons. Ubisoft does not want another repeat of Star Wars Outlaws. And actually, it has sold shockingly bad. I mean, we knew it sold pretty badly. Ubisoft pretty much admitted it as much. But a new stat really hammers it home. This is from Christopher Dring, who's reporting for VGC. And he reports that Outlaws only hit rank 47 in the EU sales charts. And then twisting the knife even more, he adds that it actually lost to last year's big Star Wars game, Jedi Survivor. And that's a game that, as a piece of software, well, had a completely disastrous launch, where it was a total shit show on consoles. But pretty clearly, now that that game has been fixed up, the underlying fundamentals and appeal of that game do seem to be proving stronger than Outlaws, at least so far. So that's almost certainly why this big delay has happened. They're spooked. They don't want another bad launch. And since November, they've shown off some actually kind of neat things, like there's combat redesigns, there's parkour that actually looks a lot more involved than, just holding the forwards button, which is quite nice. And I mean, look, it is kind of fun to clown an Ubisoft, and they've done a hell of a lot to be clowned on, yes. But from a consumer point of view, this is actually good news. I mean, whenever a company is basically afraid that if its game isn't good enough, people will reject it and not buy it, that's a good thing for us. And if they then start to delay their games to polish them more, well, doubly so. That's good for us. I mean, look at the state of some modern games. And what really drives it home for me is looking at Outlaws, where Ubisoft Corporate clearly learned that it's so much harder to salvage a busted launch than it is to just delay a game and get it right. Now, this is quite spooky if you're Ubisoft. So, the game is a respectable 76% on Steam, but it only has 2,000 reviews. That is not that much whatsoever. Its player counts are real low. They are actually eclipsed, not just surpassed, completely eclipsed by any of the last 3 Assassin's Creed games. I mean, when I checked earlier, Assassin's Creed Odyssey was at 11,000 concurrents, and Outlaws was at 750. That really does tell us something. And in fact, Assassin's Creed Unity and Black Flag are also both beating Outlaws, which, was pretty damn new on Steam. So it's a kind of wild situation, but it does show us something. Assassin's Creed is the backbone of Ubisoft's business. If Shadows misses, they are in absolute deep shit. And I think they know that. Insider gaming sources corroborate that polish is actually the reason that's being discussed internally. But I think there's quite clearly another factor, one that's going to impact you, but also impact shareholders. And that's the fact that February 2025 is absolutely goddamn insane. By now, it's a full-on tradition that February is basically just Christmas 2 for gaming, and this time it is actually quite big. So there's Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. That's had some pretty damn strong previews. There's a lot of hype coming off the first one. I think it could actually be an outsized hit, but there's also Avowed. There's Like a Dragon, Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii, which is rather funny because, pirate gameplay, Ubisoft, Black Flag, Skull and Bones. Anyway, there's also Monster Hunter Wilds, and there's Civ 7. Now, for comparison, March, which is the month they're going to be launching in, has got Split Fiction and Football Manager 25. So it's a stacked February, but Wilds really is going to be the big one here, and that's because Monster Hunter World was Capcom's highest-selling game ever. Like, that game's performance is absolutely unhinged levels of big, and I think even more importantly for Ubisoft, it was massive on consoles. If you're Ubisoft, you absolutely do not want to be competing for the same dollars in the same month. So overall, it's pretty simple logic. What's going to cost Ubisoft more? On a first order basis, it's getting their $70 1 month later at the expense of like another month of a team's burn rate, I guess. But second order, it's more about sticking the landing. That's because earlier on, I didn't bring up those Assassin's Creed Steam chart numbers as a bit of a goof or a gaff. No, I brought that up to prove a point here. Assassin's Creed is a platform. Assassin's Creed Shifts DLC, and I'm sure there is somebody out there who is mad enough to actually buy the premium currency inside their Assassin's Creed game. But the point is, Assassin's Creed has an absurdly long tail. It generates massive back catalog revenue for Ubisoft. And if you've ever wondered, like, Ubisoft seems to have nothing but bad news. How on earth are they still alive? Well, it's basically because their back catalog is insanely strong. But of course, they've had to lean in that strength. So any weakness to that is going to seem like a truly existential extinction event. And that is only giving ammunition to a group that I've got to imagine CEO Yves Guillemot basically considers to be the enemies within. Let me lay out the stakes for you. So on one side, we've got Yves Guillemot. Now, in the 2010s, he and the Guillemot brothers entered a pact with Tencent, and this was to fend off a hostile takeover attempt by Vivendi being a big French megacorp. And from then till now, that pact has kept the ruling family in control. Of course, not all has went well since then, and other investors are understandably quite angry. Per one activist investor, they're not exploiting their core IP properly, and that investor, AJ Investments, are going to come up later in this video, and that's because they basically want a big private equity deal to completely change how the company runs, gut everything, and hopefully turn a quick buck. And the thing that's interesting about them is they started off with a relatively small position only recently, which was obviously when the stock price was heavily depressed, so you know what sort of game those guys are coming in to play. But the thing is, this is not just business for the people involved. I mean, it is for AJ Investments, but it's not for Yves Guillemot and the Guillemot brothers, because for them, it is the family business. They founded it. That's why they're going to defend it as much as they can, especially because they do have scars. As an example, you know Gameloft, the people who just like clone mobile games? That was a Guillemot thing until a hostile takeover by Vivendi, so they want control. And all of this is why the other statement from Ubisoft matters. It's the one that was sent to investors, especially this snippet that people really loved. I'll read it out. Ubisoft has appointed leading advisors to review and pursue various transformational, strategic, and capitalistic options to extract the best value for stakeholders. God, I love some extracted value. And yeah, that does completely sound like corporate word salad, but, well, it, along with the rest of the statement, does have a pretty clear meaning. So here's a word salad-free version TLDR. Shareholders got mad at us for not being profitable enough, so we said we'd find cost-cutting opportunities and look into selling parts of the company. Now we've paid somebody to go and do that for us, and they'll probably find a few ways, and we've some sale options floating around us, but we can't talk until anything happens. That's basically what the statement meant. Simple enough, really. And they call out things like, say, closing 3 studios in, quote, high-cost geographies, which basically just means the whole fallout of XDefiant's shutdown. And really now, we're just kind of left with a waiting game. You see, what's likely happening here is Tencent are, again, likely, waiting for the Guillemots to cede some influence in return for funding a family takeover. Think about it from Tencent's perspective. It was Tencent's deal that allowed the Guillemots to, retain control of Ubisoft. Now Ubisoft is very much embattled. So if they want to buy up more of that stock and have more ownership, well, Tencent are going to be thinking, what do we get out of this deal? That'll be quite fun, and I'm sure they're licking their lips. Now, did this statement to investors actually work? I would say so far not really. You see, their CEO and CFO were pushed for details on the actual call. Things like, actual sales being considered. Are there people wanting to buy the company? What other cost savings have happened? What can be sold off from Ubisoft? They were even asked if Tencent's military ties would be a problem for the United States. And basically answers to those questions in the Q&A were not really present. Basically, Ubisoft couldn't really say anything, not while a deal is in progress, and when anything anything that they say will rock investors, which is why we got insane corporate word salad that frustrated everybody, both players and investors, by basically saying nothing. And that means that for Ubisoft, there is only one way out. And that is shadows. Place yourself in Yves Guillemot's shoes and basically imagine this: your single most important product underperforming right as you are negotiating some form of buyout deal. That's what's on the line here. That is not good. And that is why, for the company, Shadows has got to land. Not just for the company, for its owners, for its leadership. March the 20th is the latest that they can launch while still seeing a full week sales in Q4 of the financial year. And insider gaming sources, who, by the way, have continually been spilling bad news about Ubisoft as well, they did report that pre-orders were high, actually, before the game's delay, and that they still look strong. Now, the thing is, that may seem completely mad, right, if you live on Twitter and YouTube, but it's actually not. Assassin's Creed has an absolutely, genuinely huge audience. I mean, take a game like Valhalla. To so many people, that ended up being the peak slop game. But actually, if you look at the sales of Valhalla, they are utterly gargantuan. So that likely means that Ubisoft leadership are kind of buying time here, right? Especially with such a fluffy statement like that. And I think what they want is even more polish so that they can then, of course, have some maybe short-term positive word of mouth, maybe some like good reviews because of the combat and movement improvements to the game and the launch build, polishing, which they very much will want to avoid a sort of Outlaws-like situation. I mean, and when I say all their eggs are in the Assassin's Creed basket, I really do mean it because, well, all else that they've got officially scheduled is a season of Mythic Quest, because they do that with Apple TV, and some live service updates. Like, that is straight up it for the first half of 2025. Now, there are plenty of games in development. So they've got a new Far Cry game, they've got a new Ghost Recon game, there's the Sands of Time remake, might happen some decade, there's a Black Flag remake, and a bunch of other Assassin's Creed projects like Hex. But if you ask me, the real question is what Ubisoft will even look like by the time those games come out. The thing that shone through clearly in researching this story is that analysts expect that Ubisoft will not make it through 2025 unchanged. Internal health at the studio is bad. Again, insider gaming sources suggest that employee trust is as low as 15 to 20% in some studios. So as a business, it's rough. At the bottom, it's rough. And at the top, it's real bad. The Guillemots are absolutely hanging on for dear life right now. And I guess it's kind of interesting because, in a way, the personal incentives of the Guillemot brothers are shockingly aligned with some audience members, with customers. And that's basically because the only way the Guillemots are going to get out of this is if they somehow land on a really big hit. So they have all of these incentives to have the best launch of this game that is humanly possible within like a reasonable time frame, because if this doesn't end up being good, they lose so much clout, so much control, and they're probably going to be outmaneuvered. And so in a rather counterintuitive way, that's kind of good news, but not really for the best of reasons, because it is kind of the boss's greed and protection of personal empire that is aligning his short-term incentives with ours. And that means that straight up, there is no good option here, because if Ubisoft plods on, it still is the Ubisoft that we know, and if they manage to get through this, they're going to be back to their old tricks and their old ways of doing things. So that's not exactly great. Now, if Tencent get their way, well, that's going to be even more consolidation in the games industry, and again, smaller projects are probably going to die. But then, obviously, if AJ and their fellow activist investors do get some sort of private equity-funded ownership thing going on, well, you can bet that whatever new leadership in that scenario, well, that they do not care about games, that they only care about profit, and that is a world where you will see absolutely Activision levels of min-maxing just the things that work, and no creative risks, which would absolutely suck. To be honest, what that means for me is I'm actually looking forward to the future, both out of genuine and morbid curiosity. And speaking of that, speaking of things that are a bit morbid, Kerbal Space Program 2. There's interesting, maybe good news, and to learn about it, check out this video next.